Thank you, Linda. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the news studio the UK Ambassador to Lebanon, Mr. Tom Fletcher. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if our audience knows, but this is the farewell interview. After 4 years in the country, you are sadly departing us. So we're going to discuss a little bit about these last 4 years, starting with just 2 weeks ago, former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown was in the country. And of course, he's the UN Special Education Envoy, and he noticed that the Syrian refugees have overwhelmed the Lebanese public schools. And he said he will help Lebanon's government raise $100 million before the August start of schools. So how are they planning to fund this?
Well, his idea as the UN Education Envoy is that there should be no borders to education. And in the way we talk about Médecins Sans Frontières, we should now talk about Éducation Sans Frontières. And so he's picked Lebanon as one of the 3 or 4 pilot countries in which to retest this concept. Can we get education through, even in the midst of conflict, even in the hardest situation? And you asked about the funding. A lot of the funding will come from donors. There's a lot of British money already, 50 million over 5 years. We're already funding all of the textbooks in the Lebanese school system. Importantly, this is money not just for Syrian refugees, but also for Lebanese communities. You know, it's coming to the most vulnerable throughout the education system.
Right.
The rest, we have to get out there and raise money. You know, there are some big donors. The UN is a big donor. The EU is a big donor. The Americans are a big donor. Hopefully as well, we can convince some of the non-traditional donors in this sector to get more involved as well.
Non-traditional meaning?
I'm thinking, you know, countries in the Gulf, for example, that might not have these the same programs in place as at the moment. But the great thing we have now is there's actually a plan in place, and we're working with the Lebanese government.
Right.
You know, there's a Lebanese government strategy. We've got a minister who's actually very engaged on these issues. And so there is a window of opportunity to make that progress. I think we have 100 days left until the school term starts, and we've got to raise that 100 million in those 100 days.
It's a lot of money. You spoke about the Lebanese education minister. You mentioned him, Ilyas Bousab. He says that more than 400,000 Syrian children need schooling, nearly twice the total number of Lebanese students. And the numbers just keep increasing. Do you think this is going to be a problem? I mean, it is kind of a problem, isn't it, at this point?
It's a huge problem, and I think any country would be struggling under those numbers. But I ask people to imagine those 400,000 kids in 10 years' time. Think of them if they're doctors, teachers, engineers, TV presenters. Or imagine those 400,000 kids if they don't get education. So if you worry about a security problem, you better worry even more about the security problem if we don't get them that education they want.
What about the demographics of Lebanon? You know, you've been here for 4 years now. You know the Lebanese well. The demographics have, especially actually in the last 4 years, because since 2011, since the Syrian war started, more than 1.5 million refugees now. The demographics are changing. 4 million people, so we're reaching almost half of that. The demographics changing, yeah.
These numbers are absolutely staggering. But one thing that I'm very clear about, and I spend a lot of time talking to Syrian refugee communities, they want to go home. There's not a sense that they want to stay here forever. You know, a lot of those kids that we're getting education to, we talked to them, we said, why do you want education? And they said, we want to be engineers, we want to be teachers, we want to go home and rebuild Syria. Obviously, it's important that all of us redouble our efforts to finish that conflict in Syria, to get some kind of peace deal in place that allows these guys to go back. In the meantime, we have to get them help, shelter, food, and most importantly, education. But this has got to be as preparation for them to go home, not as some kind of permanent settlement.
You know, we mentioned education, we mentioned kids, we also mentioned the Syrian war. Ranj Alauddin, he's a doctoral researcher at the London School of Economics. He wrote that one of the biggest threats facing the UK today, according to a major study by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, is Islamic extremism. He says ISIS is continuing to attract British and other European Muslims. Of course, we've seen the case of the 17-year-old Hamad Munshi from Yorkshire in England. We've seen the 3 schoolgirls that have also fled to join ISIS. I know this problem cannot probably be stopped fully, but do you think it can be contained?
Well, obviously, there are different ways that we're trying to contain it. You look at the longer-term strategy, which is around education and job creation. You've got to find ways to try and ensure that these communities feel they have hope in their own areas. And then, of course, there's the military alliance, and we're part of a coalition now, which is heavily involved in Iraq, in trying to deal with the most extremist elements at source. I think you can, if you like, reduce the potential for people to be attracted in some kind of talismanic way.
What do you think
Daesh.
attracts them to that? I mean, these are young people. It's the internet. They're saying a lot of these are happening on the internet as well as face-to-face. Some Muslim communities in Britain that probably, do they feel like outsiders? Do they feel like pariahs? What do you think the problem is?
Well, many will be from groups that see themselves as disenfranchised or see themselves as lacking in hope in some way. And so what you've got to do is to show them that you can deliver for them. Others will be attracted, as you say, by the rhetoric, by this sense of Daesh's successes on the ground. And that's why we have to confront, in a military way, those forces fighting on the ground. We have to show that, actually, this isn't some kind of invincible army by any stretch of the imagination. It's a kind of ragtag group of militias fighting for very different reasons. And in many cases, not well trained, not well equipped.
But I think also the recent American strikes, a lot of analysts and critics have said that they have not been successful in containing Daesh and ISIS. So I think you're right in the sense that young people are attracted to the fact that they see this as a successful thing, and so far nobody's proven the contrary. They've been able. They've gone to Palmyra. They've been able to gain ground in Iraq and Syria both. So, and I know. As you said, Britain is to send more troops to the Middle East in the battle against ISIS to train moderate rebels, but it's a little bit chaotic right now. Who's moderate, who's not? How does that work?
Well, we have very, very clear criteria for who we will work with and who we won't work with. And clearly a group like Daesh, a group like ISIL, is completely beyond the pale. And we have to, I've always been very clear here, that we have to do everything possible to keep Lebanon out of the Islamic State and the Islamic State out of Lebanon. And that includes the work that we're doing in Iraq to contain the problem where it is. But it will take time. It's the appetite for military intervention in the West is not what it has been in the past. People are much more cautious. There has been a democratization of foreign policy making, which means it's harder to simply take swift action, decisive action in the way that we might have done in the past. We have to take much more account of people's views in the West. And the reality is that Western communities are reluctant to surge in huge numbers of troops. People are quite scarred by the experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right. Which is why we need to look at a whole
Although a lot of people will argue that it is those interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan that have led to this. A lot of people argue that beforehand, Daesh would not have been possible or would not even have been created had there not been the vacuums in Afghanistan and Iraq specifically.
I don't think extremism is a recent phenomenon. It's something we've been confronting, dealing with for centuries, in fact. So I think it's too simplistic to say all of this is just because of Iraq, the intervention in Iraq, or it's all because of the intervention in Afghanistan. And it's quite striking now, the number of people who were saying to the West, stay out of the Middle East, don't intervene, 10 years ago, and now the ones saying, where's the West? Why isn't there more intervention? The reality is that not every problem in the world is created by the West. Many of these problems existed already.
But the West certainly has wanted to lend a helping hand. It's been there in a lot of times, whether it was needed or not. Speaking of the West, a month ago, the Conservatives won the general election. Prime Minister David Cameron was re-elected, and among the things I'm sure he has on his agenda is foreign policy, of course. What do you think, moving forward, Britain's role will be in the global arena?
Well, I used to work for David Cameron in Downing Street, and so I know he's someone who has a very clear sense of Britain's role in the world. And he, more than anyone, is furious at some of the commentary about Britain being somehow in decline or in some way in retreat from the world. And I think what you're seeing now at the G7 summit, for example, in Germany, is Britain setting out its stock on the kind of role we can play in the future. We've just, for example, passed 0.7% of GDP for overseas aid. We're one of the first countries, certainly one of the first big economies to do that. That makes us a very influential actor around the world. But the key thing about this is you shouldn't measure a country's power by how much money it spends on its military alone. It's about much, much more than that. It's about your humanitarian effort. It's about what you do on education. It's about what you do on diplomacy. And it's also about your smart power. 11 of the 20 Oscars went to British-related films or films with a British component.
That's power.
Look at the London Olympics.
Right.
This is power. Actually, in the modern age, a much more connected age, your smart power, which is a combination of your soft power and your hard power, is much, much more important than just guns and bullets alone. And I believe, we're surging.
You spoke about diplomacy, of course. It is what you do. And I know that for the last 4 years, you've been very active, whether it was on the humanitarian level, the economic level, even the business level. Can you tell our audience any lowlights, any highlights? So what are you taking with you as you leave?
I mean, it's been the adventure of my life, really. I feel heartbroken to be leaving. I have been an ambassador to Lebanon for 4 years, and I know that I'll always be an ambassador for Lebanon now in the future. I've kind of found something here, connected with something here, which is very, very special to me. There have been many highlights. It's been just terrific to get out and see the country. I'm so pleased we got textbooks to the kids in all the state schools, for example. I'm so proud of what we've done with the Lebanese army up on the border, giving them the training and the support to match their courage and to keep ISIL, keep Daesh on the other side of the border. That's been a very important legacy for our work here in the recent years.
That would be the highlight, you would say?
And I'm very proud. We've virtually doubled British trade in 4 years as well. I've loved connecting through Twitter, through social media, with people in a different way, trying to find new ways to reach out and engage with people. It's been full of highlights, and I think it won't sink in until I leave quite how special this has been as an experience for me and for my family. My second son was born here. My first son has been educated here. My wife has been working here. It's been an adventure for all of us.
Well, the doors will always be open for you to return whenever you would wish to. Thank you so much for being with us, Ambassador Tom Fletcher. A very emotional ending and a very emotional farewell here to 4 years of diplomacy. Back to you, Linda.